Montana Territory, 1882. A harsh winter wind swept across the open plains, rattling the loose shutters of Valerie Foster's small homestead. At 22 years old, she had already experienced more grief than most endured in a lifetime. The widow stood at her kitchen window, watching snowflakes dance in the fading light, her delicate fingers tracing the condensation that formed against the glass. Her long chestnut hair fell in loose waves down her back, and her simple blue calico dress hung loosely on her slender frame. "No use waiting for ghosts," she whispered to herself, a mantra she'd repeated since burying her husband Thomas 2 years prior after a Sioux raid that left half the county in mourning. Valerie believed with unwavering certainty that love in this untamed territory was nothing but a fleeting illusion, appearing briefly before being swallowed by the harsh realities of frontier life. The West took everything eventually. Her parents to cholera, her husband to violence, her future children to circumstance. The small homestead she'd managed to keep running was her sole purpose now. 60 acres, 8 cattle, 3 chickens, and endless work that left her hands calloused but her mind blessedly occupied. Survival, not connection, had become her singular focus. The neighboring families checked on her occasionally, but she maintained a polite distance. Attachment only invited more pain. That evening, as the snow began falling more heavily, Valerie heard an unusual sound above the wind's howl, the labored breathing of a horse and the dull thud of something heavy collapsing against her front porch. She grabbed her husband's shotgun from above the door, checking that it was loaded before cautiously pulling it open. A man lay face down in the gathering snow, a dark stain spreading across his shoulder. His horse stood nearby, steam rising from its nostrils in the frigid air. The stranger wore a worn leather coat, faded denim, and a blood-soaked shirt beneath. "Mister," Valerie called, keeping the shotgun trained on him. When he didn't respond, she stepped closer, nudging him with her boot. "Nothing." She hesitated. The sensible choice was clear: close the door and let nature take its course. One less drifter in the territory, one less potential threat. The harsh Montana winter didn't forgive weakness, and neither should she. Yet something, perhaps the last remnant of who she'd been before grief hardened her, made her lower the shotgun. With considerable effort, she dragged the unconscious man inside, leaving a crimson trail across her clean wooden floor. By lantern light, Valerie cut away his shirt and discovered a bullet wound that had passed cleanly through his left shoulder. His face, though pale from blood loss, was strikingly handsome, strong jawline dusted with light stubble, straight nose, and dark lashes that contrasted with his sun-bronzed skin. He couldn't have been older than 25. "You picked the wrong widow's house to die in, cowboy," she muttered as she cleaned and dressed his wound. "I'm not burying another man on this property." 3 days passed before the stranger finally opened his eyes, startlingly blue against his tanned skin. He attempted to sit up before groaning and falling back against the pillow. "Easy," Valerie said firmly. "That bullet nearly took your arm off." "Where am I?" he asked, his voice raspy from disuse. "Foster Homestead, 10 miles east of Bitterroot. I'm Valerie Foster." "Levi Xavier," he replied, wincing as he shifted. "Obliged for your hospitality, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. You're still more likely to die than not." His lips curved into a weak smile. "You sure know how to comfort a man." "I'm not here to comfort you, Mr. Xavier. Just to keep you alive until you can move on." Over the next week, as January's bitter cold encased the homestead in ice, Valerie tended to Levi's wound with clinical detachment. She learned he was 26, worked as a cattle driver, and had been ambushed by rustlers while delivering a message to a ranch near Bitterroot. "They got the jump on me," he explained one evening as she changed his bandage. "Took my guns, my money, but I managed to get away." "The territory's crawling with opportunists these days," Valerie replied, her fingers working methodically. "That's why I keep to myself." "No family?" Levi asked, watching her face carefully. "Widowed. 2 years now." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's the way of things out here." Her tone was matter of fact, but her hands trembled slightly as she secured the fresh bandage. As February arrived with its relentless snowstorms, Levi grew stronger. Though he still couldn't use his left arm properly, he insisted on helping around the homestead, chopping wood one-handed, tending to the animals, and fixing the loose porch step that had bothered Valerie for months. "You don't have to do all this," she protested one morning when she found him cleaning out the chicken coop. "You saved my life, Mrs. Foster. I pay my debts." "Valerie," she corrected automatically, then flushed when his gaze met hers. "Everyone calls me Valerie." That evening, as they sat by the fire eating rabbit stew, the silence between them felt different, charged with something Valerie refused to acknowledge. "Tell me about your husband," Levi said suddenly. Valerie stiffened. "That's not a story for pleasant dinner conversation." "I'm not looking for pleasant. I'm looking to understand the woman who dragged a half-dead stranger into her home." She set down her spoon, studying him with narrowed eyes. "Thomas was kind. A schoolteacher from Boston who thought he could build something meaningful here." Her voice hardened. "The territory showed him differently. And you? What did it show you? That attachment is a luxury. Out here, it's a weakness that gets exploited." She stood abruptly. "You should rest. Your shoulder won't heal if you keep pushing yourself." In the following weeks, Valerie found her carefully constructed walls being tested. Levi's presence filled the small cabin with life she'd forgotten existed. His laughter when the milk cow kicked over a full pail. His quiet humming as he mended tack by the fire. The way he listened intently when she spoke, as if her words mattered. One night, during a particularly violent snowstorm, the temperature dropped dangerously low. They huddled close to the fire, wrapped in every blanket Valerie owned. "My pa used to say Montana winters separate the living from the merely breathing," Levi said, his breath visible even inside the cabin. "Wise man." "Not particularly. Drank himself to death when I was 15. He poked at the fire. But he had his moments of clarity. "Is that why you became a drifter?" "No family ties." Levi chuckled. "I'm not a drifter, Valerie. I've got 200 acres south of Helena. Cattle ranch I've been building for 4 years now." Valerie blinked in surprise. "You're a rancher? Did you think I was some saddle tramp?" His eyes crinkled at the corners. "That bullet must have damaged my reputation along with my shoulder. You never said, you never asked. You were too busy waiting for me to leave." The truth of his words stung. Valerie looked away, into the dancing flames. "I suppose I was." As March brought the first hints of thaw, Levi's strength returned fully. He moved around the homestead with ease, his shoulder healing into a puckered scar. Valerie knew the inevitable was approaching. He would leave, return to his ranch, his life. The thought shouldn't have bothered her. It did. One crisp afternoon, Valerie returned from checking fence lines to find Levi saddling his horse. "Time to head out," he said, tightening the cinch. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Though she'd known this moment was coming, Valerie felt something crack inside her chest. "Your shoulder is healed, thanks to you." He turned to face her, his expression solemn. "I owe you my life, Valerie Foster. You don't owe me anything." Levi stepped closer, his blue eyes searching hers. "What if I want to offer something anyway?" For a heartbeat, Valerie thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached into his pocket and extended a folded paper. "My ranch," he explained as she took it. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, that's where I'll be." Then he was gone, riding away across the melting snow, taking with him the warmth that had somehow seeped back into Valerie's cold existence. She told herself the hollow feeling in her chest was simply readjustment to solitude, nothing more. Spring brought new calves, fresh grass, and backbreaking work that left Valerie too exhausted to think about blue-eyed cowboys. Summer followed with blistering heat and endless chores. She declined 3 dinner invitations from a widower in town, ignored the matchmaking attempts of well-meaning neighbors, and focused on survival. But at night, when the house creaked with emptiness, she sometimes unfolded Levi's worn paper, tracing the carefully drawn map to his ranch. In late August, disaster struck. A lightning storm ignited the drought-dry grassland near Valerie's homestead. She worked frantically to dig fire breaks, but the wind shifted, driving flames toward her cabin and barn. Neighbors arrived to help, but the fire moved too quickly. By dawn, her barn was gone, 2 cows dead, and half her hay destroyed. "You can't stay here alone, Valerie," Mrs. Peterson insisted as they surveyed the damage. "Come stay with us until you can rebuild." "I'm not leaving my land," Valerie replied, her voice hoarse from smoke and exhaustion. "Then you'll starve come winter. Your livestock needs shelter, and you need help." That night, Valerie sat at her kitchen table, staring at Levi's map. Pride told her to burn it. Practicality argued otherwise. After hours of internal debate, she made her decision. 3 days later, she arrived at the Xavier Ranch with her remaining livestock, a wagon of salvaged possessions, and her pride in tatters. The property was larger than she'd imagined. A substantial main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals spread across a picturesque valley. Cattle grazed on rolling hillsides, and a creek wound through the property. A ranch hand directed her to the main house, where she found Levi on the porch, reviewing paperwork. He looked up at the sound of her wagon, disbelief washing over his features before he stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. Valerie. She couldn't read his expression. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. Something that made her heart race uncomfortably. My barn burned, she stated flatly, refusing to appear desperate. I need somewhere to keep my cattle until I can rebuild. Levi crossed to her wagon in long strides. Are you hurt? Was anyone with you? I'm fine. Her voice caught unexpectedly. Just lacking shelter for winter. Without hesitation, he offered his hand to help her down. Whatever you need is yours. For as long as you need it. The next weeks were an adjustment. Valerie insisted on working to earn her keep, helping with cattle, mending, cooking, anything to avoid feeling like charity. Levi's ranch hands, a dozen men of varying ages, treated her with careful respect, though she caught their curious glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Levi himself maintained a respectful distance that both relieved and disappointed her. He provided a small cabin near the main house for her use, ensured her livestock were well tended, and included her in planning discussions about the ranch, valuing her practical knowledge. You've built something impressive here, Valerie admitted one evening as they sat on his porch after supper, watching lightning flicker in distant clouds. Still building, Levi replied, his profile thoughtful in the fading light. A ranch needs more than cattle and buildings to be complete. What more could it need? She asked, though something in his tone made her nervous. He turned to look at her directly, his gaze unwavering. A home needs a heart, Valerie. Before she could respond, hoofbeats approached rapidly. A rider appeared in the gathering dusk, his horse lathered with exertion. Mr. Xavier, the man called. Trouble at the north pasture. Rustlers hit the Hendersons and are heading this way with stolen stock. Levi was on his feet instantly. Get the men. We ride in 5 minutes. He turned to Valerie. Stay here. Lock the doors. Within minutes, Levi and his ranch hands had galloped away, leaving Valerie alone with her turbulent thoughts and the weight of his unfinished conversation. The men returned after midnight, exhausted but successful. They'd intercepted the rustlers, recovered the Hendersons' cattle, and captured 2 thieves who were now tied up in the barn awaiting the sheriff's arrival from town. You should see the doctor, Valerie insisted when she noticed blood seeping through Levi's shirt sleeve, his previously injured arm. It's just a graze, he dismissed, though he didn't resist when she led him to the kitchen to examine the wound. As she cleaned the shallow cut, Valerie's fingers trembled. You could have been killed. Worried about me, Mrs. Foster? His attempt at lightness fell flat when he winced as she applied antiseptic. Don't be ridiculous, she muttered, focusing on bandaging his arm. I just don't want to be responsible for another funeral. Levi caught her wrist gently. Valerie, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. Death comes for all of us eventually. Out here, maybe sooner than later. But that's exactly why we can't waste the time we have. I don't know what you mean, she lied. Yes, you do. His voice softened. You've been running from life since Thomas died. Building walls. Shutting people out. Valerie pulled away, suddenly angry. You don't know anything about it. I know loss, Levi countered, standing to face her. I know what it's like to think the safest path is the loneliest one. But I was wrong, Valerie. And so are you. I should check on my cattle, she said stiffly, moving toward the door. They're fine. This conversation isn't. There is no conversation, Mr. Xavier. Just a widow rebuilding her barn and a rancher who's forgotten his place. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth, but pride prevented her from taking them back. Levi's expression hardened momentarily before settling into careful neutrality. My apologies, Mrs. Foster. You're right, of course. He stepped back, creating distance between them. Your quarters are ready whenever you wish to retire. The following weeks passed in strained politeness. As September gave way to October, Valerie's new barn rose quickly with the help of Levi's men, though he himself remained conspicuously absent during construction, attending to business in Helena. When he returned, something had changed. He arrived with a smartly dressed woman beside him in his wagon, elegant, blonde, and laughing at something he'd said. Valerie watched from the corral, an unexpected jealousy twisting in her stomach. "That's Miss Victoria Sampson," one of the ranch hands informed her. "Her father owns the bank in Helena. Been sweet on the boss for months now." "Mr. Xavier's personal matters are none of my concern," Valerie replied coldly, turning back to her work. That evening, Levi introduced Victoria at dinner. The woman was poised, educated, and unfailingly polite, everything Valerie was not. She spoke of Helena society, of books and music and plans for a grand Christmas ball at her father's estate. "You must attend, Mrs. Foster," Victoria insisted warmly. "Levi speaks so highly of your resilience." "That's kind, but I'll be returning to my homestead soon," Valerie replied. "My barn is nearly complete." Later, she overheard Victoria asking Levi, "Why does she insist on living alone out there? It seems terribly dangerous for a woman." "Valerie Foster doesn't fear danger," Levi answered. "Only connection." That night, unable to sleep, Valerie slipped out to the barn to check on her pregnant cow. She found Levi already there, placing fresh straw in the stall. "You should be entertaining your guest," she said, keeping her distance. Victoria retired early. Journey tired her out. He straightened, studying Valerie in the lantern light. "Besides, I wanted to make sure the cow was comfortable. First calf can be difficult. I know how to birth a calf, Mr. Xavier. I never suggested otherwise." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why must every conversation between us be a battle lately?" The honest question disarmed her. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I think I do." He stepped closer. "You're afraid." "Of what?" "Of admitting that in 6 weeks here, you found something you thought was lost forever." "And what's that?" Her voice was barely audible. "Belonging." His eyes held her steadily. "You belong here, Valerie. With the land. With the work." He hesitated. "With me." The truth of his words struck her like physical pain. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't or won't. Does it matter? You have prospects." She gestured vaguely toward the house. "Miss Sampson clearly adores you." "Victoria is my banker's daughter and a friend," Levi corrected. "Nothing more." "It doesn't matter," Valerie insisted, though relief flooded through her. "My homestead will still be there," he interrupted. "But ask yourself honestly, what are you rushing back to? Empty rooms and endless work just to survive another season alone?" When she couldn't answer, he continued more gently, "Stay through winter. That's all I'm asking. Stay and let yourself feel something besides duty and grief." Before she could respond, a low moan from the cow drew their attention. The animal was in labor, earlier than expected. "Perfect timing," Levi muttered, reaching for clean rags. They worked side by side through the night, all personal matters forgotten as they focused on helping the struggling cow. Dawn was breaking when the calf finally emerged, small but alive, its mother exhausted but recovering. Watching Levi gently guiding the newborn to stand on wobbly legs, Valerie felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling that had stood firm for 2 years. "Life finds a way," Levi said softly, noticing her expression. "Even when we think it's impossible." November arrived with early snow and bitter winds. Valerie's rebuilt barn stood ready on her homestead, but each time she mentioned returning, Levi found reasons to delay. Another storm approaching, cattle needing attention, preparations for winter. She pretended to believe his excuses, secretly relieved. As Thanksgiving approached, Victoria Sampson returned to the ranch, this time accompanied by her father, a stern-faced banker with calculating eyes. They arrived as Valerie was helping prepare dinner, flour dusting her apron and hair escaping her practical braid. "Mrs. Foster," Victoria greeted her warmly. "Still with us, I see." "Just until weather permits safe travel," Valerie replied, acutely aware of her work-worn appearance beside Victoria's immaculate one. That evening, after a generous meal, Mr. Sampson cleared his throat. "Xavier, might we discuss business matters privately?" The men retired to Levi's study while Victoria engaged Valerie in polite conversation about holiday preparations. An hour later, Levi emerged looking troubled. Mr. Sampson followed, satisfaction evident in his expression. "We should celebrate," the banker announced. Xavier has just agreed to terms that will expand this operation considerably. The loan papers will be ready next week. Wonderful news. Victoria beamed, squeezing her father's arm. Valerie caught Levi's eye, but he looked away quickly. If you'll excuse me, he said, I should check the livestock before the temperature drops further. Later, Valerie found him in the barn, aggressively forking hay into stalls. Something's wrong, she stated, not a question. Levi paused, leaning on the pitchfork. Samson's terms include more than money. He wants a family connection to secure his investment. Understanding dawned with painful clarity. Victoria. He made it clear. The loan comes with his daughter's hand, or not at all. Levi drove the fork into the hay with unnecessary force. And without that expansion capital, I can't survive competition from the big outfits moving in from Texas. So you'll marry her. Valerie's voice was flat. I didn't say that. You don't have to. It's the sensible choice. She turned to leave, unable to bear the conversation further. Valerie, wait, don't, she cut him off. You don't owe me explanations. I'll be returning to my homestead tomorrow. In this weather? It's foolishness. Perhaps, but it's my foolishness to choose. The next morning, Valerie loaded her wagon before dawn, her few possessions and livestock ready for the journey. As she hitched her team, Levi appeared, his expression thunderous. You're really doing this? I am. She secured the final buckle, avoiding his gaze. Running away again. Returning to my home, she corrected. Where I belong. Levi stepped closer, his breath visible in the freezing air. Do you really believe that? After everything, what I believe doesn't matter. What matters is reality. She finally looked at him. And the reality is that you need this expansion to survive. Victoria comes with it. I don't fit in that equation. You're wrong. Am I? Then tell Samson you won't marry his daughter. His silence was answer enough. Valerie climbed onto the wagon seat, gathering the reins. Goodbye, Mr. Xavier. Thank you for your hospitality. The journey back to her homestead was miserable, cold, lonely, and punctuated by a growing certainty that she was making a terrible mistake. But pride drove her forward, away from the inevitable pain of watching Levi build a life with another woman. December brought relentless snow and isolation. Valerie threw herself into work, reinforcing her cabin for winter, tending her small herd, and pretending the ache in her chest was from physical exertion rather than heartbreak. 2 weeks before Christmas, a blizzard descended without warning. Valerie battled howling winds to reach her barn, checking on her animals as snow piled against the doors. Satisfied they were secure, she fought her way back to the cabin, nearly missing the dark shape slumped against her porch. Hello, she called, squinting through the whiteout conditions. The shape moved slightly. A man, half frozen and covered in snow. Valerie, a familiar voice croaked. Levi. Shock propelled her forward. What on earth? He struggled to stand, his face pale with cold. Had to find you. Storm came too quickly. She helped him inside, alarmed by how heavily he leaned on her. His clothes were frozen stiff, his lips blue with cold. You fool, she muttered as she stoked the fire and helped remove his ice-encrusted coat. You could have died out there. Would have been worth it, he managed through chattering teeth. Once she had him wrapped in blankets before the roaring fire, color slowly returning to his face, Valerie demanded answers. Why are you here? Where's Victoria? The expansion. Gone. He accepted the hot coffee she pressed into his hands. Both gone. What happened? I told Samson I wouldn't marry his daughter for any amount of money. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He didn't take it well. But your ranch will survive without his money. It might not be the biggest operation in Montana, but it's mine. His eyes held her steadily. And I'd rather have a smaller ranch with the right woman than a cattle empire with the wrong one. Valerie's heart hammered painfully. Levi, I love you, Valerie Foster. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. I have since you dragged my bleeding body into your home and told me not to die on your floor. A laugh escaped her, somewhere between joy and disbelief. That's a strange moment to fall in love. Maybe. He set the coffee aside and reached for her hand. Or maybe it was exactly right. Seeing your strength, your determination, even when you were trying to convince yourself you didn't care. I was afraid, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. I still am. Of what? Of losing everything again. Of surviving it. That's the thing about love, Levi said softly, drawing her closer. It doesn't guarantee we won't lose. It just makes what we have worth the risk. The blizzard raged for 3 days, howling around the small cabin while inside. Walls crumbled and truths were spoken. Valerie told Levi about Thomas, about her guilt at surviving when he hadn't, about her fear that loving again would somehow dishonor his memory. Levi listened, holding her through tears she'd never allowed herself to shed. In turn, he shared his own losses: the mother who died in childbirth, the father who drowned his grief in whiskey, the younger sister taken by scarlet fever. "We're both survivors," he said as they lay before the fire on the third night, her head on his chest. "But there's a difference between surviving and living. I want to live, Valerie, with you." When the storm finally broke, leaving brilliant sunlight on pristine snow, Levi took her hand and led her outside. In the breathtaking stillness of the winter morning, he knelt in the snow. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not next year or when spring comes. Now. Today." "There's no preacher for 50 miles, she protested weakly. "Then we'll say our vows to each other and make it legal when we can. I don't want to wait another day to call you my wife." Tears froze on Valerie's cheeks as joy overwhelmed her final defenses. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They spoke their promises beneath the vast Montana sky, witnessed only by mountains and meadows blanketed in white. Promises of partnership, of facing life's hardships together, of building something stronger than either could create alone. That night, as husband and wife in all but legal documentation, they made plans. They would combine their lands, his ranch and her homestead, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. They would build a new house come spring, large enough for the family they both hoped to create. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Valerie confessed as they lay together in the darkness. "Hope. Purpose beyond mere survival. That's what love does," Levi replied, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "It gives us reason to build tomorrow instead of just enduring today." As January 1883 arrived, bringing with it renewed purpose and shared dreams, Valerie finally understood the truth that had eluded her for so long. The frontier wasn't a place that took everything. It was a place that demanded everything, including the courage to love despite uncertainty. When spring arrived, they made their union legal in the small church in Bitterroot, surrounded by neighbors and ranch hands who'd watched their story unfold. They built their new home on a rise overlooking both properties, and as summer ripened into fall, Valerie discovered she was carrying their first child. Standing on their porch that autumn, watching the sunset paint the valley gold, Levi's arms wrapped securely around her, Valerie marveled at how completely her world had transformed in a single year. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, leaning back against his chest. "Giving up the expansion? The bigger ranch?" Levi's hand rested protectively over her growing belly. "Not for a single moment," he said with absolute certainty. "Some treasures are worth more than gold," Valerie Xavier. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Valerie knew that the love she'd tried so desperately to avoid had ultimately been her salvation. The wounded cowboy she'd reluctantly saved had returned to rescue her from the prison of her own making, proving that even in the untamed West, hearts could heal and love could endure.